Nicole Shanahan was RFK Jr.'s running mate, and she is here today to tell me about her journey to faith in Christ. We will talk about her baptism, but also her political evolution. She went from being in the thick of what she calls the tech wife mafia, that very progressive world, to a place of questioning progressive ideology altogether. This was a fascinating, very wide-ranging, very personal, and sometimes emotional conversation, and you guys are going to get so much out of it. So without further ado, here is Nicole. Nicole, thanks so much for taking the time to join me. This is not my usual backdrop. I love it. It's so beautiful. Well, I've been so excited to talk to you, and really kind of what sealed the deal for me, I was like, I've got to talk to her, was when you posted the video of your baptism, of your testimony. And we won't get into all of that right now. We'll build up to it. But can you tell me what it was like leading up to that moment before you decided to share it publicly?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure for me to be here with you. I've read your book, Toxic Empathy.
Thank you.
It's an incredible book that I am recommending to all of my friends, progressive or conservative.
Wow,
Most of my
thank
friends
you.
are progressive, but I think it's such a good read for progressives as well.
Oh, thanks.
But yeah, to answer your question about my baptism, and then I actually wrote an essay about it and posted some pictures. The lead up to it was, I'm in this constant pursuit of trying to share some very big lessons that I think many people can relate to. Lessons from being a lifelong Democrat, leaving the party, realizing that this is bigger than politics, that we've got something happening globally, really as it relates to the spirit of humanity and the spirit of what it means to like actually truly be human.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of my journey to my baptism was really challenging and painful. There were a lot of things that happened that were shocking. There were things that happened when I was on the campaign trail with RFK that were just unexplainable. I developed a relationship with God. I'd always believed in God since I was a little girl.
Yeah.
But my relationship with God evolved at a rate that I think only a U.S. presidential campaign that can evolve. And, you know, it's you are getting put through the fire.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's looking at everything you do all the time, and it really makes you feel exposed in a way that you really start having this interpersonal. I started having a really interpersonal relationship with God.
Yeah. Just through the feeling that you needed to pray.
I needed to pray, and I needed to listen. I needed to hear God's voice. I needed guidance. You get put on your knees quite a bit. And this was no ordinary election.
Yeah.
So, I toyed with the idea of going to President Trump's inauguration. Lots of folks had invites for us. I was, even given an award by an organization, and, all of the glitz and glamour of it. It was very. My old self would have been very drawn to it. But something happened to me last September, which I haven't really started to talk about, but I'll share with you. Jacob and I, we got pregnant. I got pregnant on the campaign trail unexpectedly, and I was 20 weeks pregnant.
Wow.
And we were starting to taper down the campaign, and but I wanted to go out there for mothers. And so I really wanted to keep doing more, even though my body was kind of like, you got to slow down. But I was right at that very end. And then I had wrapped an interview actually with Megyn Kelly. And that was the day that I had my miscarriage. And it was pretty far along. It was really scary.
Yes. Wow.
I almost lost my life. Wow. And I was at Stanford. Actually, at 20 weeks, they take you to delivery. And so I went into delivery, and it was just not a good situation. Lost over 4 liters of blood. You only have 4 liters of blood, so I lost pretty much everything.
Oh my goodness.
And pretty much was dying. I was dying and was losing a baby, and it was a very scary experience. But at the same time, I was taken so close to the end. And you could feel it. I could feel it, right? Like I could feel.
Like you could feel your life slipping from you?
Yeah. I had lost so much blood. And they were, I waited till I wanted to save the baby. So I waited to do the surgery. I didn't want to lose the baby. And so I was like, just wait, maybe it'll stop. So I waited, and I probably waited a little bit too long. And so then came the transfusion, and then, the kind of rushing into the OR. And there's this moment where like, I actually had peace.
Yeah. Wow.
With this idea of going. And the chaplain came in, and, you just don't know if you're going to come out of surgery.
Right.
So it was a moment of like, I want to live. I'm going to fight. Because I want to come back for my daughter, my 6-year-old. And I know she needs me. And God, if like you want to bring me back, I'm going to give it my all. And I'm going to, anyways. So,
yes.
And I came back. I woke up, and I like couldn't believe it. But I woke up after surgery, and I had lost the little girl, and we said goodbye before I went into surgery. And, waking up, I just was like, groggy because I was out. And my first question was like, do I have my uterus? Yeah. Because there was a chance I wasn't going to come out with my uterus. And the nurse goes, you have your uterus. And I was like, oh, thank God. And I was like, and I'm alive. She's like, you're alive, and everything looks good. And I was like, wow, I'm alive. Wow. And my brother had flown in from Colorado, and I saw him in the hallway. And then I saw Jacob in the hallway, and I was like, all right, I'm here.
Yeah.
But so that was the end of September. It was actually on my 39th birthday. Wow. It's like wild set of events.
Yes.
And so many strange things happen around that time that I just really, I saw like, I saw some things that were just like in the strictly materialistic world don't make sense. In the spiritual world, well-defined.
Yeah. Yeah.
And anyway, so long story short, why did I decide to share my testimony of baptism? I don't know what, we don't know what God's plans are for us. But after that experience, I can listen. I hear the intention of what like God hopes for how I spend my time, right? And I'm more sensitive to that. And I want to do a good job with it, as I always have, but there's more guidance than there was once. And the desire to share and the desire to actually get baptized instead of going out to DC.
So your baptism was it on the same day as the inauguration?
The day before. The Sunday before.
Okay.
And then I decided to write it up and share it because I know that people are very spiritually lost right now. People that I know closest to me who might not understand exactly what it is that I'm doing with my life right now, because they're just like, is Nicole now like a right-wing Christian nationalist? That's how
of course
progressives would explain such a thing.
Yeah.
But I'm not. I'm actually exactly who I've always been, with new life lessons that have empowered me to share.
With more clarity. Can you talk about how in between your miscarriage and posting the baptism video, there were a few months there. And I know you said that you felt like you could understand the intentions of God more. But can you talk specifically about, because you converted to Judaism a few years ago.
Over a decade ago.
Over a decade ago. And now you're a Christian. So at what point did you realize, wow, this Jesus person is who he says he is, and Christianity is true?
Yeah. I started paying more attention to Christianity a few months into the campaign. For one, I started spending a lot of time with Zach Henry, who is he helped launch Vivek Ramaswamy's political career, and he was part of Vivek's team that I had interviewed when I decided to run for vice president. Zach is an evangelical Christian from Texas.
Okay.
And Zach's presence and his love of the Bible and Jesus is one of the things that really changed me in my perspective of evangelicals. And again, I'm from Oakland. I spent all my time in progressive circles, and white Christian evangelical nationalists were destroying America, right? And oftentimes painted as radicals who are unempathetic, love Trump or Trump sycophants, and are just, non-intellectual, unintelligent, like all of these horrible,
backwards,
hateful, right?
Yeah.
Like mean and hateful. And then here I am with Zach Henry, the first evangelical Christian in my life.
Wow.
And I'm like, this guy is incredibly nice.
Yeah.
Also really smart. Incredible tech savvy, one of the best writers I've ever met, learned my voice within a few weeks, was able to we worked together so well. Probably one of the favorite people I've ever worked with.
Yeah.
And incredibly compassionate. And so my biases all go out the window with Zach on evangelical Christianity.
Shout out Zach. I don't know Zach, but good job, Zach. That's a great impression.
Yeah. And when you're on a campaign trail with a politician, politicians, they have bad days too.
Yeah.
Probably some of the worst.
I can imagine.
And Zach saw me on some pretty rough days, and he had compassion. He would just kind of explain his political analysis, but he would do so from a place of just patience, but also his references. He would include biblical references at times too. And I'd be like, that's a really interesting analogy. And then I would kind of go and prod more and ask about some of these biblical references. Because I'm aware of the Torah, but when you pair the Torah with the New Testament, something totally different happens. And you've got now this expectation that you can be this great person, that others, you can be genuinely great in your own body, but you can also create this experience for others around you of this is the good and just thing to do. And I think that example is what those who follow in the way of Christ and really think of Jesus as an individual, this really model individual, they seek to create that atmosphere for others. And it's that seeking of I have modeled and studied a way of being that creates peace and harmony in this world, and that is how I want to be. And that is what Zach brought to our team consistently, day after day. Never a bad day, almost. I can't think of a bad day.
Yeah.
But there is a sense of right and bad, and when things were going bad, he would intervene, and he would do so effectively, without any hyperbole, without any superfluous, unnecessary kind of emotions. It was kind of always the right emotion brought to the right situation.
Yeah.
And people in my world will spend tens of thousands of dollars on therapy to get there.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of people do. All right, quick pause to tell you about our first sponsor for the day, and that is We Heart Nutrition. I've been taking We Heart Nutrition supplements for over a year now. I can tell a really big difference in my health, just my immunity, my hair, my skin, my nails. It's because all of their ingredients come in the most bioavailable form. So even my iron levels for the first time in a really long time have been good. They've been up to par. And I've taken all different kinds of iron supplements over the years, and they've never really worked until I started taking We Heart Nutrition. And now they have a new kind of supplement, which I'm super excited about. I have not tried yet, but I promise you I will try and give you my honest assessment. And that is their Wholesome Balance product that is meant to balance your hormones, make sure that everything is working correctly so you are producing the right amount of hormones that you need to. It has ingredients like saffron, ginger, curcumin, and key B vitamins. So if you're someone who struggles with really intense PMS symptoms like irritability, cramping, or if you're pregnant, you're fighting off morning sickness, if you're in perimenopause, you're starting to feel those hormonal changes, then you might need some support. Use their Wholesome Balance product. Tell me what you think. Go to weheartnutrition.com to try their Wholesome Balance. Use code Allie for 20% off. That's weheartnutrition.com, code Allie. So did you have a hard time believing at any point, like the core message of Christianity, not just that Jesus is a model for our lives, but that he is God, that he died for our sins, rose again, that he's the way to the Father? Because I think a lot of people can kind of accept that Jesus was a good moral teacher. He was a good example. But this idea that we are sinners and that we need a savior and that he is our sacrifice, did you have to kind of grapple with that at all?
Oh yeah, I think about it a lot every single day because it's a completely different way of existing. It's this way, and so I talk about it in my baptism story. Diane Robinson, who came into my life in the week after I came out of the hospital. So that first week of October 2024, I meet Diane Robinson, who is the lead chaplain at Santa Rita Jail. And I was introduced to her actually through my masseuse, who's a devout Christian, very kind man, and has become a good friend of mine. And so she comes because she was told that I had had this horrible miscarriage. I had almost lost my life. And I was pretty shaken that next week. You know, first of all, my milk came in. Ugh. And then you have no baby.
Yeah.
Your milk comes in.
My
That's
gosh.
One of the worst feelings in the world.
And all the hormones that come with post-delivery, but without the baby to kind of make it better, that's so hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, my life in many ways is like in such incredible discord. Like I have an ex-husband that I'm in a custody battle with because he doesn't believe autism is biomedical. And so it's like I have all these like really big things that I'm fighting for nationally.
Yes.
And in many ways for the world to see. It's like they see bits and pieces of it, but like, you know, what happens in my personal life oftentimes is like a microcosm of something that's happening on the national stage or bigger. And so, you know, I get home from losing my child, realizing I have this like weird blood clotting issue, probably a vaccine injury from the mRNA, because that's one of the things that happens. Knowing that like my situation is not unique. There are many women that are having horrible miscarriages all over this country right now. We have terrible maternal mortality issues. I mean, I'm lucky to be alive. I had the best in class doctors, but I know a lot of women don't make it out of that. So then I like come home and, you know, my daughter now has to go to her dad's house and I miss her. It's just, the amount of discord. So Diane Robinson comes in my life. She opens the Bible in front of me. And she goes to the verses where she's like, you need to think about Jesus's blood, like the blood of Christ. And I'm like, what the hell is she talking about? Like, what is she talking about?
Yeah.
And I'm like, all I can think about is the 4 liters of blood I lost and the transfusion I had, and like how I'm like full of all these other people.
It's like the last thing I want to think about is blood right now. Yeah.
And so she's like, no, you don't. You have to understand the power of Jesus's blood, because it's a covenant. And that covenant is the most sacred covenant. And like, you know, I've heard these terms, and these terms, they don't really fully make sense until you realize that, like, the world that we are inhabiting right now is so full of pain. And my world was so full of pain in that moment. And it's still, you know, there's still pain. There's so much pain. But to know that you're not alone, that like Jesus's blood was shed for us humans in this world of pure discord, so that we know our souls belong to him, and our souls belong to God, and that God loves us so deeply that even in our moment of pain and death, we actually can know 100% without any doubt that like we are in God's kingdom. Like we are in God's kingdom as we live and breathe and as we retire our bodies. And it's really funny hearing myself say this, because I've heard other people say this before, and it made no sense to me. It like, I kind of got it, and I was like, that's really nice.
Yeah.
But to actually now have, like, it's almost like God was like, you still don't get it, do you?
Yeah.
Like, okay, let's take you a little further.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the case, but I will say that there's this sense of waking and breathing every day now that it's like, I know from moment to moment, even when I'm on my knees, God loves me. When everyone is head around me, God loves me. That like when there is temptation in front of me, I don't have to be scared.
Yeah.
Right? Like if there is a situation of like doing right or kind of right or shadowy right, just do the right thing. You know? And if people criticize me or take me, you know, to like publish slander about me all over the press, or even threaten to take my child away from me, I will do the right thing.
Wow.
Right? Because God loves me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he loves my little girl.
It's a game changer.
It's a game changer.
Yeah. So we're kind of like working backwards, which I love. And because I want to talk about, I'm sure that your political awakening or the changes in your political worldview also like played a part in your like theological and spiritual awakening too.
Yeah.
And so let's back up a little bit. Let's talk a bit more about the campaign. You spoke of some just like really dark moments of seeing the very clear dichotomy of good and evil when you were up close and personal in the world of politics. Can you talk about that more?
Yeah. I saw people turn their backs on me so quickly. People that I had given money to who came to me because they were like, you know, Nicole, I want to help, you know, and it's like, these are people who came to me and I helped every single time.
Yeah.
You know, I've always believed that the purpose of wealth is to help those in need. And I would show up every single time. You know, mothers that I would give my daughter's baby clothes to, you know, kids whose birthdays I helped celebrate during the pandemic because they couldn't, you know, have birthdays. A woman who wanted to buy the first Afro-Indigenous farm in Sonoma, like no problem.
Wow.
Indigenous women who are like we need money to get this movie published on land back. And I'm like, yes, you know, like you deserve sovereignty and agency. I'm going to help you. They all systemically turned their back on me.
Wow. Publicly?
Some publicly, anonymously.
Yeah, but
no, like, you know, stopped hearing from them, you know, in my time of need when I was getting ripped apart by the press, nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
None of them came out to say, actually, even if I disagree with Nicole, she's a great person.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That hurts. That hurts beyond just the press slamming you, because those are people that you know. That hurts way deeper.
Yeah, it hurts way deeper. My closest friends, there's 4 of them. They stuck with me. They're confused by my journey, but they are good friends.
Yeah.
But a lot of the people that in my foundation world, 2 people that were on my foundation board resigned. You know, it was just, it was really tough. But I understood it. But it was kind of just like bewildering to me, because it was not like I came out for Trump like overnight. It was a process.
Yeah.
And I was very public and transparent about what that process looked like. And my platform never shifted.
Mm-hmm.
My platform has always been around agriculture, mothers, health, children, you know, let's get to the bottom of chronic disease. It's always stayed the same.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw a lot of fickleness in a lot of really powerful people, and people that, you know, really, I don't know what they felt they had to lose, but like the amount of fickleness in the face of such great, I mean, we're in the middle of a war against a great deal of loss. Like we're losing children, we're losing motherhood, we're losing agriculture and food, and our policies are absolutely disastrous. And so I think, you know, but I am at a point where even before I almost died in September, I was at a point I was like, we have to do the right thing, guys. Like, come on. Like, this should be obvious. This is beyond politics. Like, this is beyond parties. Like, let's really focus on the issues at hand and, like, let's get to the bottom of it. And then I started discovering things that were labeled right-wing conspiracy theories that ended up, I found quite a bit of evidence to support it.
Like what?
Well, you know, the idea that the mRNA vaccine is causing infertility, right?
Yeah.
And the conspiracy theory was that it was a depopulation, you know, program. Well, it actually has caused depopulation. Whether or not it was intentional, we'll find out.
Yeah.
But like, there were many people calling that out for a greater part of the last 2 years. And it was all labeled a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
The fact that Fauci knew some of the risks of the vaccine.
That the COVID vaccine has the potential to cause infertility in women.
Yeah.
And because a lot of people were saying at the time, it's, you know, it's affecting my period. It's affecting the period of people around me. And I didn't get the vaccine, but I remember listening to a podcast at the time that basically dispelled that as a total myth, that it can't happen, that there's nothing even in the nature of mRNA that could possibly do that. And yet all of these women were saying the same thing. I'm like, at some point, it's like patterns mean something, right?
Yeah. Where's, you know, and so the systemic dismissal of that by especially the mainstream media, and then friends of mine still towing the party line that like it's safe and effective, that it still saved more lives than it destroyed, right? And then it just
and we don't really know that.
We actually, I think, know for certain that's not the case.
Really?
That it has destroyed far more lives than it has saved, and that there were
vaccine itself.
The vaccine itself.
Okay, so not even just the vaccine mandates. You believe that the vaccine itself has hurt more people than it's helped?
I think pretty conclusively it hurt more people than it helped. And especially in light of the fact that there were treatments available for COVID that were effective at the time. and that the COVID-19 vaccine doesn't stop transmission.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and they said that it would. And that's like one of the highlights of the RFK campaign when he was like, can I play it for, I think it was Howard Stern, when he was like, can I play when, Fauci and Maddow and all those people said that you wouldn't get COVID, you wouldn't transmit COVID if you got the vaccine.
Yeah.
And I don't think they played the series, but he was obviously right about that. They said something that wasn't true.
Yeah.
All right, quick pause to tell you guys, to remind you to get your tickets for Share the Arrows. So excited. Francesca Battistelli is going to be leading worship again. It's going to be amazing, even bigger than last year, but we are keeping our mission, which is to bring solid theology and challenging teaching and encouragement and lifelong friendship to Christian conservative women. So bring every woman in your life. Go ahead and get those tickets now. Plan all your logistics. It'll be here before we know it. October 11th in Dallas. Go to sharethearrows.com.
And another example, which crosses over with your work, Allie, is I was such a Planned Parenthood, freedom of choice maximalist. And there was, prior to joining politics, I couldn't see anything negative to Planned Parenthood and what it represented and what it stood for. Because since I was a little girl, the women's movement was always around abortion and the freedom to choose and bodily autonomy. And that was one that even like months in was something that I couldn't imagine ever being pro-life, right? Or understanding the pro-life perspective. And we had Angela Stanton King, a Black woman who lives in Georgia, and my liberal brain is like, oh, whatever, like there. It's just this liberal progressive brain is always like, okay, always prioritize minorities, like always prioritize minority opinions, minority nonprofits, X, Y, and Z, like. And so Angela comes to me, and of course I'm like, yes, what do you need me to do? I'll do anything. And we had her working on Black voter outreach, and she's like, we are going to Texas, and we are going to a maternity home. And we're going to meet the babies that were saved from abortion, the Black babies that were saved from abortion.
Wow.
And I'm like, yes, okay, let's do it. And it's my first time. It was my first time going to such a home. And I got to hold this little baby boy, the cutest guy ever. I mean, I just held him. I was like, this is the, you don't even think about pro-choice. You're just holding this child, and you're like, I just love this child so much.
Yes.
And it's not political. And you're like, why did this get so political? And so it was the first time I kind of paused and said to myself, I put all of this time into helping people get abortions. And then I looked around and I was like, I didn't help a single mother keep her baby. And how dare I? How dare, I am a smart woman who is thoughtful, but how did I miss that? In all of my philanthropic work working with the Black community, how did I miss that one? This is an important one.
Yeah.
And so it was the first time that I kind of paused and asked myself, I wasn't pro-life yet. I hadn't announced that I was pro-life. I was like, I'm definitely pro-choice, but if you work in pro-choice, you need to equally divide your funds between the choice to keep your child and the choice not to. And why would I only be treating pro-choice as abortion?
Yeah.
How is pro-choice equated to abortion automatically and 100% of the time?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense to me. I really didn't get it. And so that was the first time that idea shook in my mind and gave way to space that like something else is happening.
Yeah.
And that happened many, many, many more times along the campaign trail, that these highly politicized campaign slogans were actually being programmed into people to be absolutists. And if your version of pro-choice is 100% focused on abortion and not the choice of a mother to keep her baby due to economic reasons, then you're being programmed by something very dark. And so that's when I realized there's something very dark here.
Yeah.
Why is this so dark? And why? And then I started seeing the celebrations of abortion, that it was being celebrated. And even like my, campaign partner, Bobby Kennedy, is like, every abortion is a tragedy. And then you see these women celebrating abortion and not a tear shed. And I found that to be very confusing. And then I looked a little deeper at it. And because now I had my absolutist blinders off, right, I could just see through critical thinking. There's something wrong here. There is something fundamentally anti-human and wrong about celebrating abortions.
Yeah.
It's disgusting. And there's a difference between fighting for the right to choose and having that be still a tragedy, right? Because it is. Abortions are absolute tragedies, to what it has become, which is a jingle for a very dark cause. And it's the same thing that I see with there's like all of these animal slaughters happening, 150 million chickens slaughtered, cattle that, are being threatened to be culled next, vaccines that are making women infertile, vaccines that are in some cases killing children and having that be brushed aside as like a necessary evil. This idea of like a necessary evil.
Yeah.
Unless you subscribe to that, you're somehow anti-science now.
Yeah.
No, we can do better.
Yeah.
We are a smart community of individuals. We have screening technologies. We can create whole profiles of at-risk individuals. Why is this absolutist thinking dominating?
Yeah.
Why are the necessary evils so dominant?
Yeah.
There's something wrong.
I love your explanation of how your mind changed on abortion. I speak to lots of pregnancy centers across the country, and I still remember speaking at a banquet at a fundraiser for a pregnancy center in Houston. I think it's one of the biggest pregnancy centers in the country, and it's run by this super strong Christian Black woman. Again, she would say this, most Black women vote Democrat, and a lot of them are pro-choice. She's like adamantly pro-life, helping our community so much. But a moment that just sticks out to me in like my own pro-life journey was when she asked this table of young women to stand up. And I turned around and all of these young women were holding these little babies. And she said, all of those 8 women had their babies this year because they took the abortion reversal pill in our pregnancy center. And that just, like, as someone who has been pro-life, that even further just humanized the work that these pregnancy centers are doing.
Wow.
Like, I hear so much from the pro-choice, or I say pro-abortion side, because of the kind of the case that you just laid out, that while we need to be doing more for mothers, and I agree, like we should be, there's a lot that can be done. But the truth is that a lot of these pregnancy centers are doing that work. And if you really think we should be doing more for mothers, like, I've never met a pro-choice person who will also volunteer at the local pregnancy center and talk to the woman about what she's going through, and maybe parenting is an option for her. In fact, a lot of those women in pregnancy centers are turned away from Planned Parenthood because they don't want to tell the woman about how to parent or how to put their child up for adoption. They don't want to talk to them about that. And so really, like, if you want to look at the side who is giving a real choice to women,
Yeah.
It's the pro-life side that says, hey, you can do this.
Yeah.
And we will be here for you. But you're right. I mean, it is really now, it's such a light versus darkness issue to me. I mean, the pro-abortion side just lies and uses euphemisms to try to trap you into believing their side. And that's as dark as it gets when you're talking about human baby life that's on the line.
I have to agree. And your book did such a good job talking about the history of abortion. And it's really interesting because you talk about the eugenics movement, which I have, before even relating it to the history of abortion, which I wasn't even aware of.
Yeah. It's a straight line. It's all connected.
Oh, yeah. I was already rallying against the eugenics movement as it related to where genomics has gone
Mm-hmm.
and how abused genomics, I mean, how certain organizations treat genomics as this cure-all to all diseases, such that they're willing to now use CRISPR on humans.
What is that?
CRISPR is a protein-based gene editing therapy.
Okay.
Where you can use a protein effectively to snip DNA and then replace it with different DNA.
Okay. That's above my scientific understanding. But you're saying that they're doing this in nefarious ways.
Well, it ends up being something that I think is worth looking at through a moral lens.
Yeah.
Because, I first came across CRISPR and was like, CRISPR is amazing. We can solve all of these diseases with CRISPR by just changing the DNA. And then I realized that there was something more happening, and I found it through my work in women's fertility. I'm the largest donor in women's reproductive longevity. I actually helped create the field. The field didn't exist in longevity medicine until I came along and I said, I'm going to put $100 million into women's reproductive longevity. Well, the first big battle I had was when there was a group that was trying to create eggs out of skin cells.
I just heard about this. So this is not new. I just heard that they're trying to do this.
Yeah. And if you think about what they're doing, and they're doing it under the guise of women's health. I don't understand how creating zygotes in a lab is women's health.
Yeah.
But that was the first group that kind of tried to infiltrate the reproductive longevity movement that I was working so hard to create.
And when you say reproductive longevity, do you mean the ability to have babies longer in life?
For healthy women to stay healthy enough so that they can have a baby when they want.
Okay.
Within a reasonable amount of time. But we now have women in their 20s that are having fertility issues.
Right.
We have women in their 30s with serious fertility issues.
Yeah.
And then now we have more women wanting to have babies in their early 40s who can't.
Mm-hmm.
Or who are told by IVF clinics that they can't.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me was something that was an unaddressed need in society. And I was like, as a person with wealth who feels a great deal of responsibility to do the right thing with their wealth, I'm going to come in and I'm going to help fund the science into what is now being coined as regenerative women's health.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you take a woman who is facing all kinds of health challenges, which is going to show up as infertility often, and how do you address those underlying health issues and bring that woman's fertility back so that they can conceive naturally, carry naturally, and have a healthy pregnancy, and then give birth to a healthy child?
Right.
And you'd think every feminist in the world would be on board with this.
Yeah.
But we see a bunch of now the feminists go towards IVF, right? And if you're a progressive feminist, your version of fertility treatment is IVF.
And surrogacy.
And now surrogacy. And what comes with that as well is now artificial zygote creation, zygote selection, and editing.
Yeah.
Lab based editing,
Which is all eugenics.
which is the dream of eugenics.
Wow.
That has been the vision of eugenics. So I'm reading your book and I'm like, holy cow, the eugenicists were behind Planned Parenthood too.
Yeah.
And they've taken over the entire women's liberty movement.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, we're in trouble. And this feels very dark. This feels very, very dark to me. And it feels very scary and very sad.
Yeah. Not a lot of people on the progressive side, or I would say even in the middle, or even on the right, will talk about IVF and some of the ethical problems with IVF and surrogacy.
No, many people cheered when Trump said he was going to pay for IVF.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so people know, I've talked about it a lot. People know my, Christian conservative perspective on it and why I'm against it. And obviously, you're a Christian too, and we share a lot of the same political views as well, but you're coming at it from a little bit of a different angle than I am. I think you understand a lot of the technology behind it, even better than I do. But how I've heard you talk about it is different than how I've talked about it. So can you tell us why you're kind of like trying to sound alarm bells about this?
I think there's a big risk in, and I come at it strictly scientifically. The scientific definition, one of the scientific definitions of extinction is the inability to naturally procreate. So, like English bulldogs, they cannot naturally procreate without assistance.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
fun fact.
if you let English bulldogs have at it, they will not survive as a species likely.
Okay.
Right? They will go extinct. Such is true of any species, including the human species. So I'm looking at it from the pure view of the human species is going extinct because we are not able to conceive without intervention. And IVF is that intervention. So my concern is looking at this very practically from the standpoint of, are we so sick we are now dying? We are expiring as a species. The answer is yes. How do we course correct? We have to care for the woman, and we have to care for the child, and we have to think about medicine through that very narrow lens of organic procreation, because if we lose that, we have lost the human species. And that is what is happening. And it is the ethical thing to do if you are investing in science, if you are providing medical care, if you are a public health official. It is your ethical responsibility to understand that. And then it is also your ethical responsibility to understand the risks of that IVF actually pose on healthy women. So when I saw them selling IVF and egg freezing to like 20-year-olds, healthy 20-year-olds, if you look at the data, IVF increases breast cancer risk. It completely miswires your ovulation. It is not without its own risk of ovarian torsion, which has left many women infertile and requiring being rushed to the hospital to fix that ovarian torsion, or in some cases they lose their ovary.
Yeah.
So it is a highly risky, highly invasive medical procedure. It's not natural at all to the human body, which is what causes these downstream long-term issues, potential health risks. And so I see the IVF industry selling it to healthy women as if it's like getting your oil changed.
Yeah. Risk-free.
You do it on your lunch break.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And it was actually the owner, Martin Varsovsky, that I had he's the owner of Prelude, which is part of a group that owns most of the IVF clinics in the United States. And in about 2017, I had a real debate with him, because he was like, my secretary just did it on our lunch break. It's no big deal. was like, what are you talking about? It's a huge
Like,
deal.
which part? Harvested her eggs or had the embryos transferred?
He I don't remember which
Which
part, but
part it was.
like he claimed that the whole process of like harvesting eggs is no biggie.
Yeah. Which I've heard from even pro IVF women. It's a big deal. It can be extremely painful. They'll gaslight you about your pain. And I know you've talked about this, but they will harvest a ton of eggs. They're technically not supposed to, but they will be harvesting 20 something eggs. And like the hormones that you have to stimulate your body with in order to get those eggs ready for retrieval, as you're saying, lots of consequences, lots of pain, and the creation of all of those embryos, those human lives. So many times women are not told by doctors, like, by the way, you might have leftover embryos and you should think about that. It's just, if you want to have a kid, this is what you have to do.
Right. And you can either donate your embryos to science, God knows what's going to happen to them, or you can have them destroyed in the lab.
And you can have embryo adoption, but I mean,
and you can donate.
Yes, there's more than a million, frozen embryos on ice right now, and who knows what's going to happen to them.
Yeah, nobody really knows. I just did a great podcast with Callie Fell.
Yes, I listened to it.
She's fabulous. She's a really good one to follow on this issue. And she met a woman that they harvested over 50 eggs from her in
at
one
one
round.
Time. My gosh.
Which is just wild when you think that the body's only designed to ovulate one egg
per
month.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. It's funny, like you mentioned before, if you're against all these progressive stances, then you're anti-science. But I find that progressives tend to not believe that science has anything to tell us about, say, gender or sex, or it doesn't have anything to tell us about gestation, or it doesn't have anything to tell us about how reproduction should work. Like natural biological science almost, it seems to the progressive worldview, gives us no relevant information for how we should act and the choices we should make. But at the same time, they will say that conservatives are the ones that are anti-science. That's just kind of a disconnect that I've noticed.
Well, I think progressives spend so much time making an enemy out of conservatives and Christians that progressives end up getting fixated on that enemy.
Yeah.
Versus stopping and thinking more critically. And when they stop and think more critically, they actually have a ton in common with conservatives.
Yeah.
And that was my personal experience. That we are so much more unified than how progressives are being used right now. Progressives are being used in a way that I can only describe my mom describing what it was like being in China during the advent and the acceleration of communism.
Yeah.
A similar thing was described to me, happened in Russia as well, where all of these young people thought that they were these great leaders for freedom. And they were actually being used for a massive fascist takeover of the country.
Yeah.
And the same thing's happening in America. Progressives are being used, and their empathy and compassion is being used for a fascist takeover of the United States government.
Yeah. And they see it as the opposite, though.
Well, they're well trained.
Yeah. Okay, another pause to tell you guys about Hillsdale. We know academia in the United States, unfortunately, has been mostly entirely captured by progressive ideologues. People can go and learn literally how to not only hate the country, but to teach or institutionalize hatred of country in whatever job they end up taking after college. It's a very scary place to be. We've seen all of these pro-Hamas, pro-terrorism protests happening across the country. If you don't want to pay for your child to be indoctrinated in that way, then you need to check out Hillsdale College. Hillsdale is amazing. It's a beautiful campus. It is a Christian pro-America university that actually tells their students how to think, or teaches them how to think, how to critically think, how to research, but also is instilling within them really good values. Right now, they've got all of these online courses available to you totally for free. So you can see what Hillsdale is about. You can learn about the works of C.S. Lewis, the stories in the book of Genesis, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic. There's so much. There's so much that you can learn from Hillsdale. Go to hillsdale.edu/relatable to enroll. No cost, easy to get started. hillsdale.edu/relatable. I want to go back to something that you said that was on my list of things to talk about, and we just didn't get to it at the moment. But you mentioned your daughter being diagnosed with autism. You were in the midst of a custody battle, which caused kind of discord in your life. But your daughter being diagnosed with autism a few years ago was also kind of a turning point or a waking up point for you, right? When it came to, I don't know if it's progressivism in general or just the healthcare system in America. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So my daughter's now 6. She was diagnosed with autism when she was 18 months of age.
Oh, wow.
And this was it was actually the second month of lockdowns that she was diagnosed with autism. So I have a company that I had spent 7 years building at that point, Clear Access IP, and it was the most sophisticated natural language model in AI using deep learning at the time. I was so proud of it. And it was in the patent space because I so deeply, and I still do, I still believe that the power of human innovation to create good is exceptional.
Mm-hmm.
And my whole life up until that point was around patents, the innovation system, trading patents, accelerating human innovation for the betterment of humanity. So my company is doing fairly well. But then lockdown and then autism diagnosis happened at the same time. And I ended up having to make a decision if I was going to continue running my company or be a full-time autism mom. And it became more and more clear that my daughter was going to need more of me. So in those months, I sold my company, which was the thing that I had been so glued to every single day for 7+ years. So I sell my company and then I do a deep dive into autism while the world is in lockdown, believing every word the mainstream media was saying about COVID. And it took me a really long time. It took me actually until the end of 2022 to realize that there was somehow this takeover that happened overnight while none of us were paying attention, mm-hmm. that the world had literally been taken over by a new cadre of leadership.
Yeah.
And somehow autism, vaccines, and globalism had something to do with all of it.
Yeah.
But I didn't quite piece it all together. I didn't even realize that there was this conservative independent media world. I wasn't on Twitter.
Yeah.
So I wasn't hearing all of the talk.
Mm-hmm. You're just watching like MSNBC,
CNN.
Yeah.
Whatever came across my Instagram, my like friends circle Instagram feed. But so this part of the story is hard to tell because it is very deeply personal to my marriage with my ex-husband.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's not just anyone, you know, he's a co-founder of Google.
Yeah.
And Google's role during the lockdown was significant. Google's role during, you know, the Fauci narrative was, partnered. There was a very, very deep centralized narrative, and Google really was the leader in making sure that narrative was the truth. They censored so many voices. And even to this day, Google's AI censors voices. So I, you know, yeah, and you have to understand this impacted my home life too.
Yeah.
Right? Because it was hard for me to get answers for my child.
Yeah.
For our child. And
so you're trying to piece things together and figure things out. And are you already naturally kind of pushing against the mainstream narrative just because of who you are?
Well, so I was knee deep in the autism literature and realized that the world of autism, I can remember very specifically a call I had with a neurologist who just, and I'm calling about my child, right? Like, I don't know about the politics of autism at that point. I'm just like, tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
And he just let loose. He goes, the behaviorists have taken over the field of autism. It is biomedical. Neurologists like me that try to get our work and voices out that there's something biomedically going on with these kids. We are all censored. We get no funding. The government completely ignores us, and it ignores the medical needs of these children. So here I'm on the phone. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this information?
Wow.
Like, are you,
it's providential, though.
Yeah. And he's like, well, okay, fine. For your daughter, I'll help you do an overnight EEG. And I'm like, okay, great. I'm like, because I'm just like I'm like doing what every mom does. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on with my kid and how to help her.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I do more of that, I actually then realized that the behaviorist, including Stanford Autism Center, and ABA and PRT and all of this like behavioral stuff is really being run by individuals that are very conflicted because they're like trying to establish themselves as being the leaders in autism. And in order to do that, you need money. So within like this period of time, I'm just trying to get my daughter support, and people are starting to fundraise off of her. They're like, oh, I'll help you with this, but I'm going to send you a grant request. So that started happening. Yeah. And I was like, this is really messed up.
They're trying to get money from you because they know your daughter's diagnosis and they think that you'll support them because of her.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, well, that doesn't feel great.
And I'm like, okay, well, there's a conflict. So I'm going to put you guys over there who want money from me for autism, and the people who are actually helping my child, I want to leave unconflicted. But the behaviorists are very aggressive in protecting their narrative, which now I look back and I'm like, that was a red flag.
Yeah.
And there were many red flags along the way.
Sorry, just to clarify, what is the behaviorist narrative about autism?
That autism is a DSM-5 clinical diagnosis. It's a mental illness, like
that
schizophrenia, that you're born with or that you develop. It's a developmental illness, like paranoia is a DSM-5 diagnosis. Now, autism is a DSM-5 diagnosis. It's the manual for diagnosing mental disorders.
Yeah.
And this happened it's been kind of ongoing, and the behaviorists have always believed that like it's just something psychological. Now, at this point I realize autism is definitely not just behavioral, and it's definitely not just psychological, because my child is showing real signs of medical issues. Like screaming pain, inability to control her arms. She like flaps her arms. Biting herself, self-injury. Like she actually cannot speak, and I'm like, why can't she speak?
Yeah.
Like it's not like no amount of speech therapy is helping. At this point, I have her in speech therapy for multiple years. Like, she just actually cannot speak.
Yeah.
She like lost eye contact for a while. Stomach bowel issues, and I'm like, okay, clearly this is not just paranoia and anxiety. Like there's something physical going on here.
And that's what you mean when you say biomedical. You mean something physical that caused this.
Well, it's interesting. That's where your mind goes, right? Because if it is biomedical, then maybe you can trace it to something that could have onset it or some things that exacerbate it. that's where things get really dangerous. This is where people get canceled. Because Big Pharma, this is the biggest secret Big Pharma has been trying to keep from us, is that perhaps there is something going on with either vaccines or with medications or in our environment or untreated illnesses that result in an autism diagnosis. So would that like show up with that symptomatology? And it's very, very dangerous. This is where you go from being a mom on a quest to a mom who is, quote, gone crazy, right? Because if you start picking at the biomedical diagnosis or the biomedical issues, you ask that question. The C word, cause. Could something have caused this? And every doctor who is trained by the mainstream medical industry will say, we don't know what causes this, which is true. The scientific community has not done the proper inquiry to figure out what causes autism. And you know, then once you go there, you find RFK and you find all those other mamas who have been silenced over the years, and all of those doctors who have been silenced over the years, and all of those papers who have been redacted, and all of those scientists that are too afraid to do that inquiry or are producing research around that inquiry. You find all of them, and then you realize, holy smokes, this is the biggest cover-up. This is, in my lifetime, probably, this is a huge cover-up. And somehow I'm in the middle of it all. You know, and I found myself married to the guy who started the company that censors all these people.
Right.
It's a big problem for me.
Yeah.
It's a big problem. It's a big problem for anyone to find themselves in.
Next sponsor is Crowd Health. So we know there's a lot of problems with the healthcare system in the United States, even more problems with the health insurance system in the United States. Even if you have insurance, it can feel like you don't, with the rising cost of premiums and the doctors' networks that can be so restrictive. And you might just want to opt out of all of that altogether. If that's you, then you need to check out Crowd Health. It is a community-driven alternative to traditional health insurance that uses crowdfunding to help members pay for medical expenses while offering tools and advocacy to negotiate healthcare costs. You don't have to worry about doctors' networks at all. Whatever doctor you want, Crowd Health is going to help you cover the cost of your medical event. For $175 for an individual or $575 for a family of 4 or more, you get access to a community of people who are willing to help out in the event of an emergency. You get access to telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, so much more without doctors' networks getting in the way. All you have to do is go to joincrowdhealth.com, code Allie. You can get started for just $99 a month for your first 3 months if you use my code Allie. Go to joincrowdhealth.com, code Allie. It's not insurance. Learn more at joincrowdhealth.com, code Allie. Was it specifically vaccines that you were convinced were at least partly causing the autism epidemic?
So there is, if you really go down the research path, you will find that there's a mitochondrial element to autism, or what co-occurring medical conditions to autism. That's the safest way to put it. You can't say it is the autism. You can say there are co-occurring medical conditions to autism, which the American Pediatric Society accepts as real. You will find that there is an autoimmune issue. If you think about what vaccines do, is they cause immune reactions. That is their purpose. Mm-hmm. So what happens to some people and people with autoimmune issues is that you have to be very careful with causing an immune reaction, because there's some degree of autoimmune dysregulation. There's some degree of autoimmune issues.
Yeah.
So anytime an individual with both mitochondrial and immune issues, if they go in or they're already battling a viral infection and they're immune activated and they go in and they get a vaccine, that is a very risky situation.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. And if you look at the vaccine insert, right, which none of us actually get to look at,
Mm-hmm.
and I've heard from parent after parent that when they've asked their doctor to look at that vaccine insert, the doctor will be like, no, very defensive. You might need to find a new pediatrician.
Yeah, doctors are so defensive about it.
They're so defensive. But if you actually get an opportunity to look at the possible risks of all kinds of vaccinations that are standard on the childhood vaccine schedule, there's encephalitis, which is, brain swelling. There's, all kinds of very serious acute issues that can happen. What they don't necessarily talk about is the chronic issues that occur if one of these acute responses happens.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't even give you the ability to monitor your child for having an adverse reaction.
Yeah. Not long term. They might sit you in the office for 30 minutes to see if something, like anaphylaxis happens. But long term, you're kind of forgotten about.
Yeah. And there's been story after story about mothers calling in, fathers calling into the doctors and saying, hey, my child got this horrible rash after the vaccine. It's probably not the vaccine. Or if it is, don't worry, they'll get through it.
Yeah.
So we're ignoring a very, very part of healthcare, which is how to screen a child before a vaccination,
mm-hmm.
and then how to pick up and screen for adverse reactions that could turn into a chronic, lifelong issue in that individual. And that's all we're asking for. That's all this community of mothers is asking for. We just want to see some change as it relates to being responsible around a very, very serious thing that's impacting many, many, many people right now.
Yeah. You mentioned that obviously created conflict with your then husband, but you were also in this kind of like tech world, this tech wives world. And you've talked about before, I heard you talk about in an interview, that these tech wives are very progressive, and sometimes they are spearheading the philanthropic progressive causes, not just in Silicon Valley, but really like across the country. And so I imagine as you're kind of going through this, of course, at the time you didn't consider yourself conservative, but you're starting to like piece things together, or against your husband, probably against a lot of people in that community. Like, can you tell me a little bit more about what that world is like? How deeply indoctrinated is it in progressive ideology? And also it's, kind of a 3-part question. Like, what was it like for you as you were kind of waking up to everything?
I think at the heart of the progressive billionaire wife mafia is a real desire to want to be liked, to give back, and to be celebrated for doing good work. And there is an ego, a belief that they were brought up in a way. Many were highly educated. Many have professional backgrounds, great degrees from great institutions. But then the wealth sets in. And if you think about the trajectory these women go on once the wealth comes in, usually the wealth comes in not necessarily because their tech husband is this exceptional entrepreneur. It's because what I've realized is that the government helped fund their husband at some point along the way. If you look at like the history of Google or the history of Facebook or the history of Apple, even the history of not so much Amazon, but like even Hewlett Packard or Oracle, these companies didn't just spring up out of nowhere. They came through institutional backing at some point. In the case of, Facebook and Google especially, where a lot of these tech wife mafia folks come from. It was Stanford. There's this Silicon Valley Stanford network. And if you look at where some of those grants or money came from, early money especially, and then accelerant money, it came from individuals that had government ties. And so these companies serve government functions as well. Google really was involved with the government in helping identify behavior on the internet, and Facebook as well. And so it's no surprise that the intertwining between the Democratic Party, which is so prevalent in California, and these companies has just always been there. That synergy has always been there, and that relationship has always been there. And, I don't think that the wives necessarily are bad people, but I think that their worlds are so small, and they actually have no idea how small those worlds are because they can't break free of it.
Mm-hmm.
And they feel this need to contribute to these causes that are within that very small sphere of influence.
Mm-hmm.
And that's their only litmus test of am I valuable or am I not valuable?
Yeah. And they think they're doing the right thing. We're talking about Priscilla Chen, Lauren Powell Jobs, Mackenzie Bezos. I mean, they were
Carrie Tuna,
yes.
Dustin Moskowitz's wife.
Funding, immigration causes, which are really enabling and exacerbating illegal immigration. So-called criminal justice reform, which I know that's part of your background as well.
I was the criminal justice one.
Yeah. Okay. So
that
was kind of
Carrie Tuna on that. Yeah.
That was kind of your focus. I mean, you helped fund George Gascon's campaign, right? When he was running for
I had
DA.
worked with him when he was San Francisco's DA. And he actually was good then. But what happened around the pandemic is that this whole other segment, what I don't think many of the tech mafia wives realize is that they were used to set the groundwork for what was called the reset, what is called generally as the reset by the Klaus Schwabs of
the
the
Great
world.
Reset.
The Great Reset. Yeah. They openly talk about this Great Reset.
Yeah.
So the tech wife mafias, I believe, were kind of being conscripted in many ways, and their money especially was being conscripted in to set the groundwork for the Great Reset.
Yeah. Specifically through
a network of NGO advisors, relationship with Hollywood, relationship with Davos, and their own companies. So if you look at who's on these boards, who hangs out with each other, how the culture of tech wealth works, Silicon Valley tech wealth, and that small group of people responsible for a huge amount of money and a huge amount of NGO activity across the United States. It's a really small group of people, and it's a really small group of people making these decisions.
Yeah.
And then completely blind to everything else that's going on and how their groundwork is being used to then enable these other policies, these Great Reset policies. Now, what this group of women doesn't realize is that in their haste, these women are all very busy.
Yeah.
They have multiple properties. They have tons of staff. They have staff issues, chronic staff issues. Their kids are busy. Their kids oftentimes have some health issues as well. A lot of them have relationship issues with their husbands. And a lot of them themselves are medicated on SSRIs and antidepressants and all of that because it's just overwhelming.
Yeah.
So, so it's chaos, and these women find their meaning through their philanthropic work.
Yeah.
and they'd find themselves. Like I would find myself. That was my self-worth, was my philanthropic work, and I really believed in it.
Mm-hmm.
I really believed that I was giving Black communities a chance to like rise up out of oppression. I really believed that I was helping Indigenous communities rise up out of oppression. And now that I look back and see how all those grants were forming, you know, because my version of success is those communities are actually uplifted.
Yeah. Not just more money pumped into them.
Not just more money. No, the problems of the community have gotten worse. Crime in the community has gotten worse. Mental health in the Native community, the Indigenous community, has gotten worse. They will even say, the Indigenous community will even say that their biggest supporters in Congress have been Republicans, but yet they continue to vote Democrat.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that is this, it's like the whole model is broken. The whole model makes everybody worse off. And now we're contending with the frickin' Great Reset that we're now realizing is a terrible idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that many of our climate change issues are geoengineering issues.
Yeah. Wow.
Which is like, at the end of the day, they always go to that. They're like, but climate change. And then,
yeah,
and
that
was
really
like,
is the end all be all. Like, you have to let us do this because of climate change.
Yeah. Social justice and climate change, it always boils down to those two things, and it gets progressive women 100% of the time.
It does. It does. So basically how you're saying it would work, you've got all of these Silicon Valley wives who I'm sure are actually empathetic. Maybe they really want to help people, but also tied to prestige and other people thinking that you're a good person. Yes, they start their own foundations, but also y'all have got a ton of people coming to you and being like, will you
Endlessly.
pay for my grant? Will you fund my organization? Will you do this? And you looked at the criminal justice focused things and said, or social justice focused things says, yes, that's how I'm going to dedicate my money. And you're telling me you're going to uplift these communities.
Yeah.
So these progressive entities would come to you and ask for money. You would give them the money. And you're saying that none of the programs or anything that they actually installed or instilled went anywhere positive.
Well, I think that the programs themselves would run, right? The offices would get bought, the people would get hired, everyone would have fancy titles, and the nonprofits thrived. Did the communities thrive?
Right.
No. The communities did not thrive around the NGO. The NGO thrived.
It's like teachers' unions. It's the same racket.
It's a racket. And so you're like, and then the thing about NGOs is once they're up and running, they're designed to do one thing: raise more money, hire more people.
Yep.
Right? And so then the fabric, like their communities are still in bad shape. We need more money. They need the communities to remain in bad shape to raise more money.
Yeah.
But we're so close. We just need this. We saw like some progress, and the conservatives are ruining. The conservatives are the enemy.
Yeah.
Right? And the conservatives are the problem. We need more of your money. Okay, here's more money.
Yeah.
Right? So it just spirals, and you're like, oh my God, I've created a monster.
Yes. I mean, you can see how you just kind of get stuck in that cycle.
You get stuck in the cycle. And then you can sit down with your board and be like, we're pivoting.
Yeah.
This is
We
no
need more
longer
money.
our cause. We're now going to pivot. And then the NGOs will come to you and be like, that one, they pivoted. We need more of your money. And you're like, we're falling apart. And you're like, oh God, I put all this time and money into you getting to this thing, to this place for this community. And it's just like, it's a racket.
Yeah.
It doesn't make anyone better. And then it actually requires the further sensationalizing of the issue.
Yeah. To raise more money.
To raise more money.
Yeah. Last sponsor for the day is Preborn. They are a network of clinics across the country that they're doing amazing work saving the lives of preborn children. Last year alone, the network of clinics under Preborn saw 67,000 babies saved from abortion. They offer free resources, free ultrasounds, and the cost of an ultrasound is $28. So if you can donate just $28, you could be saving the life, because when a mom sees that baby on the ultrasound screen, she is so much more likely to choose life for her baby. So if you can donate $28, if you can donate $5,000, you are going to be saving lives. Go to preborn.com/Allie to make your donation. That's preborn.com/Allie. You say that your sights are still set on California politics, right? Or helping California, but in a very different way than you used to.
So I fully believe that woke ideology came out of Hollywood through the relationship of big tech, Hollywood, and Davos all working together.
Yeah.
And it's this like alchemy of like creating the sensationalism around woke ideology. And it is that. It is Silicon Valley, Hollywood, and the Great Reset. And it's kind of all spun up together to create content, to take over social media, to make sure all the money goes in certain ways politically. And so it has taken over the world, like, because it gets exported. It gets exported to the UK. It gets exported to Germany. It gets exported to Sweden. China is like watching all of this, and they're involved as well because they're like, ooh, there's an opportunity to take over Hollywood. Hello.
Yeah.
So China has a role in this, and you have to keep in mind, Allie, that if you recall from Davos when Schwab had Klaus Schwab had Xi Jinping come and give like the big address at Davos, and Xi Jinping comes on the stand and he says, I am now assuming the role of global peacemaking and leadership.
Of course.
And that happened, what year was that? I believe that was 2017? 2016, 2017.
Wow. I didn't realize that had happened that long ago.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are your endeavors? Like, what are you trying to change in California?
So much of this is about helping progressives understand how deeply they're being used to undermine their own communities.
Yeah.
They're undermining their communities. They're undermining the very people they seek to help. Because they cannot see the difference between a truly good cause and good actions and this political chaos.
Yeah.
And I want to help bring that sanity back, because the sad thing is when you get wrapped up in the political chaos, you lose yourself too.
Yeah.
You lose your ability to care for yourself. You lose the ability to care for your own community. You lose the ability to, I believe, live, in a good, in a way that connects you to God.
Yeah.
Your primary relationship should be between the individual and God, right? It's like, I believe that even before I believe that Jesus was truly a savior.
Yeah.
And I believe many progressives do have strong relationships with God. And there's a lot of chaos there. There's a lot of anger, and there's a lot of discord. And I really believe that if there's a way to just continue doing the work, whether it's through campaigns, through a book, through podcasts, through media, through journalism, through conversations, through events, if there's a way for me to contribute the proper way, right, which is no longer through philanthropy, but actually through just living the life that, like, and contributing to communities in a way that the communities feel empowered, whether that's a recall, right? If the community of LA wants a recall, they get a recall.
Yeah.
But like, not just any citizen can come up and start a recall. You have to have a whole political team. You have to have money. So if the community wants a recall, I believe my job as a person with means in the state of California who wants to help these communities, like really help these communities self-govern, they get a recall, you know?
Yeah.
I'm going to put my effort into that.
Help.
It's a completely different way of thinking about charitable works. But I think it's the way that if everyone kind of reframed their giving
Yeah.
to what do the people want
Yeah.
versus what does the NGO need,
Mm-hmm.
we will be able to solve all the problems in an authentic way.
Yeah. Well, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful about the work that you're doing. And I know that the passion, the vigor that you feel, especially for moms who are trying to figure things out for their kids, who want a better world for their kids. I mean, that is so emblematic of the whole Maha movement, but that's very relatable to a lot of people listening, no matter what side of the aisle they're on. So I'm cheering you on. I'm very thankful. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thanks, Allie.